Hey everybody, Madison here with Health by Ratio, my team of physical therapists, functional movement coaches, corrective exercise specialists, and functional health coaches all work together as a team to help our clients virtually with recovering from recurring pains and chronic injuries, as well as progressing toward their active life goals, whether that is just being generally healthy and fit, or whether that's exercising to a certain intensity or playing a sport. And like I said, we work virtually. And in today's video, I wanted to talk about one of the most powerful techniques that we use in our program. It's proprioceptive exercise. Proprioceptive exercise is a fancy word that basically means doing a exercise with either body weight or suspension trainer, resistance bands, free weights, whatever, but you're using them in a certain way to have your body get pulled in a direction that causes the muscle groups that we want to fire that aren't firing properly to turn on without us having to will them to turn on. So if like our glutes are having a tough time engaging and we're doing a bunch of squats and we can't get those glutes to turn on, well, how can we pull on the body to make those glutes fire just by us fighting against that pull? So that's what a proprioceptive exercise is. It's kind of like when somebody pushes you and you rebalance yourself without falling straight to the ground. That is a proprioceptive response. It's your body stabilizing itself without even having to think about, okay, engage the core here, engage the back here, engage that foot there, and whatever. No, your body just naturally does it. So that's what proprioceptive exercise is. And like I said, this is probably where the biggest, most fundamental portion of our program exists. Like this is where the magic really happens for everything from rebuilding the way our runners run and teaching them how to get into better alignment so that their feet and their ankles and their knees and their hips and their back are supported the way that they should be. Whether it's how our exercises, the people who are avid exercisers, whether they're doing CrossFit or HIIT workouts, how we train them how to move properly around their big patterns and their big dynamic exercises so that their body's supporting them the right way. It's how we rebuild the way our athletes move so that they stay healthy and also get more explosive and more powerful because they're using their body in a more efficient way now because they're recruiting the right muscles at the right times. And this is kind of the final stage of what we start working on in someone's time with us. But because at first we got to figure out how the body's moving. That's kind of this first step is analyze the body, figure out how it's moving, why it's doing what it's doing, what imbalances are occurring throughout its movement patterns that are causing these things. And then based off that, we got to restore our correct range of motion back into the body, right? Like if we have range of motion restrictions, we got some tightnesses, we got some asymmetries that are pulling on us one direction or another, or preventing us from being able to move correctly. Well, then we got to address those with some mobility techniques. And then once we have this range of motion back and this body is able to move the way we want it to, now we got to teach it how to do it and how to do it consistently. And that's where proprioceptive exercise comes into play. So we have a number of different modalities we can use, like I listed off in terms of equipment, and there's a million different exercises that we can do to teach the body how to move in a different way. But this is and I'm going to demonstrate a few in just a second with the resistance bands that are hanging up on my door behind me there. But before even getting into that, if you think about it, this step kind of makes logical sense as to why those of us that have been dealing with recurring injuries and or chronic pains and these random tweaks that show up, why our typical treatments aren't necessarily doing the job and getting us out of these pain cycles or out of these injury cycles every few months or more frequently for many of us. Because if we go see a phenomenal practitioner, let's say we get a great adjustment, or we from our chiropractors, or we go get some manual therapy done from a sports massage therapist, or we get maybe some isolated work done around an injury from with our physical therapy treatments. Maybe we're doing some clamshells or bridges, or we're doing some planking exercises or dead bugs or all that kind of good core specific or glute specific type exercises. Those are all great, and those treatments that release the tensions on us are all great. But did they teach me how to run any better than I was before? Am I walking any differently when I finish doing some clamshells than I was before? Do I know how to bend over to pick something up correctly now that I've gotten a great massage? No, like these things did help. They helped me release some tension. They may have helped strengthen up some muscles on me that were weak beforehand, or put me back into alignment where I was out of alignment. But they didn't necessarily teach me how to move throughout my day, and certainly not throughout my like fitness and or athletic activities, to move differently. And so if I go back to sitting in the car the same way I did before that treatment, and then I go back to walking around my house the same way and walking the dogs the same way, and then getting into my same exercises that and the same patterns that I did before, well, then I'm going to re-pull myself out of alignment, or I'm going to put the forces on that knee or on that back or on that neck that aggravated it in the first place. And I'm caught right back in that cycle. And now I'm just basically chasing symptoms. I'm just managing symptoms instead of actually getting in true health and in progressing my body and getting it more functionally strong and fit the way that I want to. So, how can we do this? Now, like I said, there's a million ways that we can, and there's a ton of different examples of exercise, and it's all dependent on each person. Like how we move is going to be unique to each person, but there are some commonalities that we see time and time again with a ton of our clients, whether they're athletes or whether they're just trying to keep up with the grandkids and live a healthy life for decades to come, kind of thing. So the one of the most common things is in a split stance. Many of us have a tendency to have our knees go toward our big toes, especially if we kneel down or lunge down. So if we go down like this, the tendency is for this knee to want to collapse inward. Well, that's called knee valgus, and that sometimes shows up in just split stance. It also can often show up in a squat pattern where the knees go to the inside. It's a really common deviation, and sometimes it happens just to one side versus the other, but it creates a ton of torque on everything from the ankles. That creates a ton of instability in there. It flattens out the plantar fascia line, so it can overstretch the bottoms of our feet for those of us that deal with plantar fasciitis. It puts an insane amount of torque on the knee itself. Everything from the patella tendon to the meniscus, the aka cartilage, your ligaments from the ACL and the MCL, they all get pulled on and yanked when that knee goes to the inside. It also compresses the hip. It irritates the labrum. It can overstretch the IT band. It can also it automatically kind of shuts off the outside portion of our butt, the glute medius, which connects to our obliques and how well they fire, and some of the stabilizers in our core. So when the glute medius doesn't fire, our core doesn't fire very well, and all of a sudden our core isn't stabilizing us, and our balance gets all out of alignment, and our back starts taking on way more tension than it should. So we'll get really wobbly as we move in and out of these lunges when that knee tends to buckle in. So this movement or this deviation, I should say, impacts so much of the body. And I should say, if the core isn't stabilizing well and our lower back is getting torqued, well, everything above that, from the thoracic spine to the neck, is sitting on top of all this. So if everything's compromised below it, we better bet that the things that are up top aren't going to be super happy with us on a consistent basis as well. So an example of a proprioceptive exercise, when we've gotten to the point where this is appropriate. Often, if we go into that tendency of knee valgus, that knee collapsing inside of the big toe, there's some mobility restrictions and tightnesses that are pulling us in that direction. So we want to figure out first and foremost is what tightnesses are preventing us from moving correctly and pulling on us in the wrong direction. Okay, let's address that. All right, we've gotten that taken care of. We've analyzed the body, we've mobilized the body. Now let's teach this body how to move it correctly. Well, a really good example is if we take a resistance band like I have here, and I have this thing connected to my door just around knee height here, and it's wrapped around this outside of my front leg here, pulling me to the inside. So it's pulling me toward the direction I want to go. So it's trying to pull me into knee valgus. I don't want to do that, but I'm trying to get this band to yank me in that direction. Because now my job is to just think about doing this lunge without letting this band win. I'm just focusing on fighting the band. So as I do my lunge here and I come down, I'm trying to keep my knee in alignment with my pinky toes, and this band is trying to yank me to the inside. So all I'm thinking as I move up and down is fight this band, fight this band, fight this band. I'm just not going to let it win. That's all I'm doing as I go up and down. And I don't have to think about turn on my glute medius. I don't have to think about pop up the arches in my foot and stabilize my ankle with those stabilizing muscles. Those things are doing all the, and I don't have to think about activating my core. All this stuff is firing naturally just by me keeping my shoulders back and keeping this knee in alignment with that pinky toe as I go in and out of it and fighting that band. Everything's turning on. I feel this outside of my butt starting to fatigue out and burn out from this constant tension pulling me inward. So that's an easy example of one of a million proprioceptive exercises that's very functional because we get into this split stance, this staggered stance, in theory 10,000 times a day, every time we walk, especially if we're a runner, even more so. If we kneel down to grab something, we're using this position. So this is a much more functional exercise to work on my glute medius, this outside butt that many of us aren't having very good activation on one side or the other or both. And then also training it in conjunction with my ankle and foot stabilizers so that this whole leg is learning how to move properly as opposed to like doing a bunch of band walks or doing a bunch of clamshells. Like that works, those exercises work that outside butt, but did they translate to also doing it with my ankles in an upright position where my core is stabilizing me in a way that I actually use my body on a regular basis? No, they developed some strength there. It's not to say that they're useless. It's just they're not very functional. They're not a proprioceptive exercise. They didn't teach me how to move differently. So that's why it's such an amazing staple for us. Now, another example, and this is another easy one to kind of demonstrate, is many people have a tendency to squat off to one side or the other. This is, I would say, like when I connect with people all the time, like whether they're in our program or not, I'm doing a dozen video analysis a week, if not more. So we've done hundreds, if not thousands of these. I would guess that 90 to 95% of the people that I see have a tendency when they squat, they do not keep their hips center as they get down to the bottom here. When they come down, they have a tendency to either shift their kind of tailbone, their lower back, off to one side by an inch or two as they're coming down, or they have a tendency for their whole torso to lean to that side, or they go to the other side. And sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's only a little inch, sometimes it's huge, sometimes they're really torquing the body. But that asymmetry is super common. Now, again, just like we talked about from this, that lunge impact or that split stance impact of knee valgus, that translates to how we walk and run and kneel and all that kind of stuff. Squatting in this asymmetry often stems from tightnesses, a tightness imbalance. Like there's something going on at the hips or there's something going on at the ankles that, or perhaps both, that's pulling us to one side or the other. So the first step is we got to analyze the body and figure out where those tightnesses are coming from. Then the second step is we got to mobilize those areas. We got to manually manipulate them. We got to get out our foam roller, our trigger point balls, do some stretches. We got to bust this tissue up and get it pliable again. And now it's time to teach it how to move correctly. And we should care about moving correctly in a squat for a lot of reasons. If we are just living life, we sit down and stand up dozens of times every day. We squat down to pick things up all the time. If we are doing any kind of athletics, well, first, a squat for most sports, most athletics, is our starting position. You're playing tennis, you're in this position beforehand. If you're playing volleyball, same thing. If you're playing basketball, you're using that for defense. Pickleball, you're getting into that squat. And then obviously if we're jumping at all, that's how we're loading into our jump and landing from our jump. So we care about squats a lot. So let's say I have a tendency for my hips to shift this direction when I squat. So I'm squatting down and my hips tend to lean toward this direction. Well, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my whole band and wrap it around the outside of my hip, pulling me toward the side I tend to lean toward. So I'm going to have this thing yanking me the direction that my body naturally likes to go. And again, I have the mobility now to move correctly. I just haven't patterned my body. I haven't trained my central nervous system how to use this range of motion correctly. So now this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to think about my squatting form, and I'm going to go through our activation. So we always teach our clients, hey, you want to get into what we call activated standing. So you want to engage the glutes, want to engage your core, want to get your shoulders back. And now as we squat, we're going to think about fighting this band. I'm not going to let it pull me off to the side. Instead, I'm going to squat and I'm going to keep my hips basically pushing this way, not so that I'm leaning too far away from it, but I want to keep center. And I'm just fighting that band as I go in and out of it. And I can feel my core is firing more to one side versus the other as it's learning to keep me centered, to keep me stable as I squat in and out of this exercise. And eventually, I'm not going to do this forever, but after enough time of me working through this exercise on a consistent basis, I'm going to teach my body to naturally squat centered. And now I'm not going to shift my weight off to the side because I reprogram my central nervous system through these proprioceptive exercises. So this is such a powerful tool. And like I said, it's where the magic really happens for our clients and our programs, because it's how we can actually teach them how to move differently throughout their days and also throughout their exercise and or athletic events, so that their body is staying stable. It's maintaining the adjustments that they worked on. It's keeping their range of motion healthy the way they want. And this is how they get to moving back to full range of stable motion and get out of these recurring pain and injury cycles that tweak us and keep us from living the active lives that we love. So guys, if you have any questions on this, feel free to type below the video. More than welcome to ask away. We're here to help. Also, if you'd like some free one-on-one help and you want some help with this step 1 and step 2 on the mobility side of what you need to work on to get your body to this point, then that's why we offer 2 free calls for everybody. We have 2 free calls where the first one is set up with my team, where we're basically downloading on what your injury and or activity background is, what your body has been through, any significant traumas. And then also we want to know your goals and what you're trying to accomplish, all that good stuff. It's a relatively quick call, but we want to get that background information and we want to know what direction you want to go in first and foremost. And then the next call is with you and I, and we connect and go over through video and go over a number of movement assessments and range of motion tests to see how your body's moving and why it's doing what it's doing. And then we create a game plan on that call that you can take and run with on your own on how to mobilize this body so that it has the proper ranges of motion that it wants. And we even talk about some specific exercises that you can be focusing on as well to move this thing back to full range of stable motion. So if you're interested in that, we'll have the link to our calendar to book your free calls underneath. And we look forward to talking with you then. Have a good one.